Well, here we go. This is something interesting. So I normally don't go to conferences. Just close the door. Normally don't go to conferences, but I've decided I'm going to start going to them because I just get this sense of it's antagonism, if that's the right emotion. I don't know why, but I get a sense that these conference organisers are really protective, and it's not very giving at all. But they want to protect, obviously, what they've built, and I understand that. What I don't understand is why you wouldn't be open to partnering or having great conversations that have a purpose to them. So we're going to give it a shot. I'm probably going to cause a bit of trouble, but that's kind of my nature. Brian Clough once said, I'm not saying we're the best manager in the first division, but we're definitely in the top one. So we're going to go and have a look. So I'm heading down to the Forefront event in Pirama Road, Jones Bay Wharf in Sydney. I'm going to go and have a conversation with some execs and just ask them, why do you do these events? What is it that you get out of it? Is it all because of self-interest? Or is it because you genuinely feel like imparting your wisdom? And it's just really interesting. We'll see what happens. I think there's a lot of reasons why execs do this, why they go to these events. I've heard it from many execs that they do it because they're looking for another job. I kind of get that. I understand that. They do it because they want to become a thought leader. I understand that. I also understand that the people that are paying to sponsor those events really hope to get to speak to them, those execs, but often they don't, which is, I guess, frustrating for the vendor who spent the money sponsoring the event. You would hope that those execs turn up to the booth so they can have a conversation, but unfortunately, often they don't. Or execs head off to another urgent meeting afterwards. And so the vendors that have paid, the sponsors, end up having to meet with the other people who are at the event, and often they're the lower level junior people that just want to come and collect the pair of socks from the booth. So it's a tough market, those events. It really is. But I think the thing for Meet Magic is that we want to look at what's not working at events and try and fix that, try and solve that particular problem. I think Rory calls it reverse benchmarking, and I think it's something that we can look at. I think we should look at what do they do really well, what don't they do really well, and fix that. Fix the stuff that's not working really, really well. Yeah, bit of a wet day in Sydney. Lots of cars on the road, everyone driving because they don't want to walk. Oh, almost crashed. So yeah, it's interesting times, I think, especially in the B2B world. Interesting times in B2B because something needs to change. Something needs to be a little bit, I'm not going to say more value. I want to say something else. So Meet Magic was set up to help vendors connect with execs. But what we're not is a lead generation company. And I see a lot of vendors looking at Meet Magic as a way to get access to execs to sell them something. And that's really the wrong thing. The real benefit for Meet Magic is that you get the door open to the right company so you can have a conversation. And those conversations can, and often do, turn into something fruitful for your business. But they're not lead generation opportunities. They're not. You don't have these meetings, walk in there and expect to find a deal. You have these meetings walking in there expecting to build a long-term relationship with a senior leader. And that is the value. The door is completely opened. The engagement is completely present. So they're not just there thinking about somebody else. They're listening to you, they're talking to you, they're engaging with you. And these meetings are guaranteed. You can have them, many of them, every week. Not just wishfully hoping that somebody turns up to the booth. That's the difference. That's the value, is you have 10 of these meetings, and if you've had 10 Meet Magic meetings and you haven't found an opportunity, well, I'd speculate there's something else amiss there. It's not the meetings. I jokingly say this, you can't have 10 Tinder dates and not get laid. The app's done its job. I'm not saying we're Tinder, but I'm saying you've got an opportunity to build a new relationship with somebody. And let's be fair, you don't go on a Tinder date and ask somebody to marry you on the first date, do you? Well, some do, but you're not meant to. And so, realistically, to go and have 10 meetings with 10 senior leaders, to ask them questions, to understand their problems, to share some stories, to build a relationship with somebody new, that's the value. That's the value in this world of AI that we're living in, and that's the value in this new B2B market that we have to go down. I've got to show you this flooding here. Look at this. Can you see that? Holy moly. It is flooded. Yeah. So we have to be careful with how we talk to people. One of the things that's really interesting is how sales people have forgotten to do the work. You know, you often hear these junior salespeople going into a meeting with an exec saying, "So, tell me what keeps you awake at night." That's actually really wrong. What they should be doing is doing the research and going into the meeting with the exec and saying, "Hey, I've done this research on you as a company, and this is what I think is probably going to be keeping you awake at night. Tell me if I'm wrong." That approach shows that you've actually done some background research. That's a form of respect, and that's what gets you to build a long-term relationship. You can't just walk in there and expect the executive to give you a purchase order or all of their information on the first date. Again, that's like asking them to marry you on a first Tinder date. And there's just something about the shift in, and I can see this from when I was in sales before the internet. We'd have to go and pick up the annual report in the office and read it and highlight their stuff in yellow that the CIO was going through, for example. I can't believe this flood that I'm going through right now. This is nuts. Wow. And so you'd highlight the stuff that you thought was interesting. You go back to the office the next day and you call the CIO and say, "Hey, I've just been reading your annual report. I can see that you're on this transformation journey. I think we've got something that we can really help you with on that. Is there a conversation that we can have? Can I come and buy you a coffee?" That kind of proves that you've done the research, you understand who the exec is, and they respect you, and often they'd say yes to that meeting because it's relevant. But that seems to have stopped now, and I don't know why. And we need to get back to that research phase. We need to get back to doing the work before you go into the meeting, that's when you get the value from the Meet Magic meetings. When you walk in there and you say, I've done the research, I understand who you are, I understand what your problems are, and by the way, ChatGPT can tell you all of this. That's the kind of cool part. What a nut job, it's just flying past me. So yeah, that's the value. You do that research before you go into the Meet Magic meeting, and you know, Meet Magic meetings are not necessarily just about getting a net new conversation so you can map that against your ROI on your MQLs, whatever it is. Meet Magic is about being really strategic. You know, if you go into a Meet Magic meeting, there's a number of angles you can take. You can take a net new engagement, and you could literally build a new relationship with one of your target markets and have that conversation. Or you can use the Meet Magic meetings to get higher up. And I've seen this happen a number of times. I think the Dell CEO of Angela Fox used this once to get really higher up in Qantas, because they didn't have a relationship with the CIO of Qantas, and so they used Meet Magic to get in the door and have that conversation. And I think if you're engaged at the architect level, doing some project in tech or whatever it is you're doing, but you need to get some validation from the C-suite, use the Meet Magic meetings to get that validation from the C-suite. That's really powerful. You use that to build that engagement. Take your founder, take your co-founder, take your country manager in to see the C-suite and say, look, we've been working with your team at the architect level, we think we're solving this problem. Well, how about you check if they've got budget? There's a whole lot of things you can be doing in that C-suite meeting, but it's a great way to get higher up. And of course, when you go higher up in the meetings, that is where often the bigger pain exists. And often, if they've got a bigger pain problem to solve, well, there's probably a bigger budget to solve it with. And so getting higher up, having a conversation with the C-suite about a project that you're working on down below could even open up the doors to a whole lot of other things that you didn't realize existed. And so the Meet Magic meetings really are about that. What doesn't work well is when junior salespeople who don't know how to have a conversation, who haven't done the research, go into the meetings and say, hey, can you look at my demo? Do you want to buy some of my product? No one cares about your data lake unless it's got a boat on it, and that's just a fundamental fact. So there's value to be had in the meetings if you know how to have a conversation and you know how to build a relationship. I mean, take a step back and think about, when was the last time you went on a date or you tried to, I don't know, flirt with somebody and pick them up? You know, you've got to be really careful about how you do that. But there is a process to it, and they have to like you, obviously. And so your job is to go and have a conversation and share and get them to like you. It's just building relationships. That they shouldn't be that difficult. But if you don't do that, if you walk into that, I don't know, that person that you like and just start all of a sudden trauma dumping on them, or sharing stuff that's unnecessary, or asking them deep questions about stuff that they don't want to tell you, well, you can see how that's going to go and how that's going to play out. Where am I? Darling, Piedmont Road. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of value to be had in the meetings. Use them to get higher up. Definitely, that is a key strategy for a lot of our customers. They use them to multi-thread. I think there's a term that they use, a modern term. So they use them to get higher up in the meetings, and often we see some really great outcomes from this. I think we had one customer that went to see 2 Degrees CEO in New Zealand, and the CEO brought the CFO into the meeting. Great, you got 2 big hitters in one meeting. And then after that, they got introduced to the CIO. Well, forgive me, but if that's not the perfect opportunity for you to go and engage with a company, I don't know what is. And so you've had 3 of the key leaders in that one company off one Meet Magic meeting, and that's what happens often with the calls through our platform. So there is obviously I know most marketing teams have to have an ROI, and these ROIs, are validated by pipeline or opportunities or something, and it's really broken because that's not what we are. We're not in that space. We are in the space of long-term relationships, and I'll give you an example. Andrew Webster, lovely old Andrew, he used to be one of the heads of Westpac Security, is now the Chief Information Security Officer at BlueScope Steel. He called me the other day, and he goes, Carl, can you remember that meeting I had with Alteryx? It was about a year and a bit ago. He said, look, I've got a project and I really need them. So what's happened there is Andrew's met with Alteryx a year or so ago, but he's remembered the conversation, and that conversation was really powerful. Obviously, nothing of importance that could have been done while he was in his previous role, but now he's in a new role. He's interested in engaging with Alteryx again. That for me is what Meet Magic is as well. You build you go into these meetings and you sow some seeds, and you just never know if there's going to be an opportunity there. And Rory talks about this a lot, and I'll tell you this quick story before I hang up and start to drive a bit, because I've got to get to where I'm going. So Rory talks about evolution and bees and the way the bee community works. And the queen bee does this wiggle dance, and 80% of the bees follow her, fly over the hill into the field full of cows. And this is typically marketing. This is called the explore-exploit trade-off. So what marketers tend to do is they exploit what they already know. That's what the 80% of the bees following the queen bee do. They just follow the queen bee because that's what they always do. So marketers tend to always go to the conferences, always do what everybody else is doing, and because it's what they already know. But 20% of bees go the opposite direction and fly over a hill, and they find a field full of flowers with no cows, and guess what? They create more value. They get more pollen. They've got KPIs on pollen. They get more pollen from that one field than the 80% of bees that went and followed the queen. And this is the lucky accident and serendipity that occurs. And that's what happens with Meet Magic. You have these conversations that you wouldn't necessarily normally have, and it's the same for the executives. They would meet with a vendor that they wouldn't necessarily normally meet with, and have a lucky accident. And they learn something, and they take that information and they solve a problem internally, or they get themselves ahead in some way. So these moments of serendipity is the explore rather than the exploit. And the explore is where lucky accidents and serendipity occur. And there's a lot to be said right now about the levels of obviously productivity in Australia. Everybody knows everything is down. And I was speaking with a friend of mine at the UNSW Sydney Business School. His name's Matthew Byrne yesterday, and he tells me, and he's at the business school. He's a professor there, or something senior. And he told me that the problem with Australian leadership is that 80% of their meetings are happening internally, not externally. So tell me, how can innovation occur if you're not meeting externally? Doesn't make sense, does it? So there's a big shift that needs to happen in order for productivity to get up. And I know for a fact that we've been told this multiple times by executives like Michael Ross, who was the CTO of Qantas, and he's now the CIO of KMD Brands. When he had his 10th meeting with Meet Magic, I asked him, Michael, why are you doing these meetings? And he said that he does them because they feel good. And when I feel good, I perform better and my productivity increases. And then I go home and I'm a better partner, I'm a better husband, better all-around father, better, everything improves. There's no downside to it. So there's a direct link between well-being and productivity. And I think, and I truly believe, that Meet Magic has the recipe for that. And so we're going to start to measure it, and we're going to start to look at this over time with the university, because I think it's really important that people don't need more meetings, they just need better ones. That's it. Anyway, I'm going to park, so I'll talk to you later. Well, that's kind of weird, because I talk about lucky accidents, and I wasn't expecting one, but I've just come down to Dalton House to gate crash an event, and I just bumped into I stopped a guy outside and I said, do you know where this place is? Because it's an absolute nightmare to find. And he said, yeah, walk with me. And we walked underneath with our umbrellas. And his name's Tyrone. Tyrone Theorides. Hello, Tyrone. And Tyrone is one of the head partner for Google Cloud. So when I talk about lucky accidents, right there, do the things that you don't necessarily think you want to do. If you think about saying no, just swap it and say yes. It's that simple. Crackers.